you are watching the special program of Tinger TV on the topic of Ulaanbaatar Dialogue 2023. The 8th International Conference Ulaanbaatar Dialogue on Northeast Asia and Security is being held in Ulaanbaatar from June 15 to 16. Since its initiation 10 years ago, this conference has been successfully organized until today. Ulaanbaatar Dialogue International Conference is attended by Northeast Asia countries this year and also from the representatives of countries such as Canada, Estonia, France, Kazakhstan, the Philippines, Turkey, the United States, and Vietnam, as well as local and foreign scientists and experts. Thus, we are here today with the distinguished guests to talk on the topic of Ulaanbaatar Dialogue. So, dear viewers, allow me to introduce the special guests here today. Mr. Byamsurung Guntufsurung, the Director General of Department of Policy at Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ms. Manthay Batsurung, Director General of Department of Multilateral Cooperation of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Paul Jakowitz, Head of Diplomatic Dialogue at Geneva Center for Security Policy. And Ms. Sonia Bachmann, Team Leader of Northeast Asia and the Pacific of UN Department of Political Affairs of the UN. And Mr. Minde Jargasahan, the Deputy Director at the Institute for Strategic Studies of Mongolia. So let's start the question with Ms. Manthay. Ulaanbaatar Dialogue International Conference is one of the most important initiatives in Mongolia's foreign relations sector. Therefore, what are the main goals of this year's conference, and what were the topics and features of the sessions? And the participants seem very wide this year.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me and having us. Indeed, the Ulaanbaatar Dialogue is one of important dialogue mechanisms, as you just mentioned. Mongolia has been consistently pursuing the policy of launching dialogue mechanisms since 1980s. And in 2013, the President of Mongolia initiated the Ulaanbaatar Dialogue. Since 2014, the Ulaanbaatar Dialogue has been held annually, and this year we have organized the 8th UB Dialogue on 15th and 16th of June. So this year, Ulaanbaatar Dialogue focused on 5 themes, including Northeast Asian security challenges and opportunities, multilateral cooperation in Northeast Asia, also futuring peace in Northeast Asia, as well as the post-COVID economic situation in the region, and promoting energy cooperation in Northeast Asia. Mm-hmm. And the year-by-year, conference-to-conference, the number of participants and also scope of the dialogue has been expanding. So this year, almost 170 participants participated in the conference and exchanged their views. Mm-hmm. So annually, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and with the cooperation of our colleagues of Institute of Strategic Studies, cooperating and organizing the Ulaanbaatar Dialogue Conference. And so also taking this opportunity, I would like to thank our supporters. So every year, the Asia Foundation and the Business Council of Mongolia supports this initiative. And yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mr. Byamsurung, the Director General of the Department of Policy at Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So how do you see this initiative's impact and its reliance on Mongolia's foreign policy and also in the future?
Well, as you know, Mongolia pursues peaceful, open, and multi-pillar foreign policy. And these pretty basic guidelines, principles are articulated in our foreign policy concepts and national security concepts. And as a country of the Northeast Asia, Mongolia is always committed to contributing to the stability of the Northeast Asia. And we are been engaged ever since. And the unique part of Mongolia is that Mongolia has traditionally friendly relations with all the countries of the region. And utilizing this uniqueness of Mongolia, Mongolia is in a unique situation to gather together all the interested parties here in Ulaanbaatar so that they can discuss the issues they have and have negotiations on a subject and topics they are interested. And our utmost goal is to come to the common understanding or to foster the confidence building within each other. This is the aim. And Mongolia, in organizing this conference, Mongolia is guided by the principle that we should not take sides to any other side. The main goal is to provide the floor and interested parties to gather in Mongolia, and they are to discuss their problems with each other with the goals to understand each other more. And for the past 8 conferences, Mongolia has been doing this, and this was highly valued. We hope and we understand this was valued by our partners, and we are grateful that United Nations is also supporting this idea. And as you know, last year, Secretary General visited Mongolia and labeled Mongolia as a symbol of peace. And I think this is one of the events that Mongolia has contributed to become the symbol of peace. So we are grateful, and we are appreciate that all the partners are supporting us.
And also the conference has been shaped a confidence-building traditional platform to deliberate regional security issues in the framework of peaceful, open, independent and multi-pillar foreign policy of Mongolia. And as just my colleague DJ Bimsuran mentioned, that the ultimate goal of the initiative is to diffuse the tensions in the region and promote confidence building, trust building, and security in the region in Northeast Asia.
Okay. Ms. Sonia Bachmann, so let's start our conversation here. So you were in the session where participants shared views on youth matters in the region. So how can the United Nations effectively address the pressing youth issues in Northeast Asia and promote their meaningful participation in our region?
Thank you very much. We're very glad to be participating as United Nations again in the Ulaanbaatar Dialogue. Mongolia is a very important partner for the United Nations, and we're in particular very glad that the youth peace builders from the region could participate in a special session and outlining really their aspirations for a region which is inclusive, which allows for people-to-people exchanges, which allows for an inclusive metaverse. And they came actually with quite an interesting policy proposal which they presented, which is a youth parliament for climate action. And as you know, climate change is one of the pressing issues of our time. Our Secretary General is advocating a lot to make progress, urgent progress, and the youth reflect really these urgency, and they're very grateful for the opportunity of this platform.
Mm-hmm. Well, to say here, besides journalists, I'm actually a Secretary General for the United Nations Youth Advisory Panel of Mongolia, and I also get the chance to speak with Mr. Antonio Guterres himself last year by representing the youth in Mongolia. So we have this issue in Mongolia, just to share it with you, that there's a lot of conference held in Mongolia, especially towards climate action, since actually from the few years. But we talk a lot, especially the youth, but the actions are less. So from your point of view, how do you see that we can make the actions more, impactful?
You raise a really important question, and the youth actually shared with the policymakers it's time for action, as you rightly point out, and it's time for implementation of the obligations, and every situation, though, has to start from a conversation. And I think the youth advocate and inject some kind of momentum with policymakers, with academia, in a collective effort which needs to happen, right, to make progress on the climate change and on the international commitments. So I think it's a good momentum which started at the UBD. We want to come back next year and see how the Climate Action Parliament is developing. But we're very grateful, at least, to have started a conversation, which will, of course, continue with all the stakeholders.
You're representing the UN in here at the UBD, so I would like to ask a question about UN's perspective of Mongolia. So given our country's unique geographical zone between Russia and China, how does the UN see its balance on security interests and its independence in the face of regional power dynamics?
Yes, Mongolia really has a unique position because, of course, geographically, but also because it is a credible platform for regional dialogue, but also global dialogue. It has a neutral approach. It has a peaceful and multipolar foreign policy. And I could see at the conference, all the other delegations, they were feeling very safe and free to mingle and to express their views, exchange conversations. So we believe Mongolia has a very strong convening power. And of course, we look very much forward to coming back next year.
Mm-hmm. So in your opinion, what are the main opportunities and also obstacles for Mongolia to actively contribute to regional security initiatives in Northeast Asia, and how can the United Nations support Mongolia's efforts?
I think there's a lot of opportunities. We had in June, for example, last June, our Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping, Peace Operations visit, and the discussion centered on peacekeeping and in particular the participation of female peacekeepers. And we know Mongolia has a large contingent of female peacekeepers, so it's a good opportunity for Mongolia to contribute to international security, global security. And also this time we had a Women, Peace and Security seminar we organized with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we had women academics, policymakers from Japan, South Korea and Mongolia exchange views how to encourage women to participate in the important conversations in the region, including security conversations. So I believe Mongolia has a very strong convening power to work with the United Nations, and we will, of course, continue our engagement with Mongolia, and we look very much forward to that.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Paul, so what are the key factors shaping the current landscape of multilateral cooperation in Northeast Asia, and how do they impact regional stability and development? Because you've participated in this session of multilateral cooperation.
Well, as we discussed in the dialogue the last 2 days, we're in a very unpredictable situation now, and a dangerous situation. Primarily, this goes back to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia last February, which continues until now. And this really has shaken up the international system, the international security order, because it's undermined some very basic principles of how states interact in the international system, including the inviolability of borders and the principle of sovereignty and non-aggression. So that has called into question a lot of the norms that we had assumed all states follow in the international system since the end of the Second World War. And it's led to a lot of doubts about whether that international system as it had operated since 1945 is still suitable in its previous shape. So I think that we had a lot of discussions about how the world and the region here needs to adapt to this new situation. You know, there are new challenges facing all of us and facing this region. There's also the, not just the Russia-Ukraine confrontation, but the Russia-West confrontation. And then in this region, more relevant probably is the, the geopolitical contest between the United States and China. And, a lot of these things, although they're geopolitical and they're between big powers, they really have serious repercussions for all countries in this region and in all regions, in fact, because there's much more tension, there's polarization. Countries are being asked to pick their side, and that just leads to an increase in tension and more problems in getting things done at the multilateral level. So, some issues in the UN setting, particularly in the UN Security Council, are very much stuck, primarily because these 2 or 3 big actors are going through heightened tensions. And so it's quite difficult to move forward with a lot of issues. And you see that playing out also in the context of the Korean Peninsula. So there's been a blockage on that front as well, which is unfortunate. And of course, we all would like that all the relevant parties would get back together and start communicating constructively, because we know that when there's a lack of dialogue, that's when miscalculations can happen, because there's miscommunication, things are misperceived or misunderstood, and this can easily lead to confusion and fear and suspicion and escalation. So that's why dialogue is so important, much more at a time like this, in fact, than in peaceful times. And that's why Mongolia is playing such an important role, allowing such and enabling such dialogue, because it's in times like this when it's so important that those channels are kept open. And I see that that's a tradition here in Mongolia, and Mongolia is uniquely positioned in this region, as others have said, because it has friendly relations with all of its neighbors and beyond. And because of its specific geopolitical position, it's in a unique situation to facilitate such dialogue. Kind of similar to Switzerland, which is where I work for a Swiss foundation. And Switzerland plays and has played historically a similar role. So I see similarities, and I very much appreciate that Mongolia is doing that in this region. In a time where it's very urgent. It's somebody said in the conference that according to many measurements, this is one of the most dangerous periods of our history. And so communication is super important in those times.
Let's talk more on the importance of this dialogue. So you said countries now are facing to pick one side, especially during these crisis times. So what is the importance of Ulaanbaatar Dialogue International Conference on such times, especially in security issues and also economically?
Well, when you face such challenges as these geopolitical tensions, then by being either forced or encouraged to choose sides, then obviously that leads to polarization. And as I said, that just builds walls in between states and groups of states. And when you have walls in between you, then you can't hear each other and you can't understand each other very well. And you can only make assumptions and have perceptions and rely on those, that incomplete information. And so it's important to build a bridge over that wall somewhere, and that's in Ulaanbaatar, because that's the place where the people from both sides of the wall can meet in the middle of the bridge, and they can see each other properly and explain what's really happening and what their fears and concerns and expectations and assumptions are, and have some of those things clarified by meeting, even conflicting sides meeting together to, clarify things and improve understanding in order to avoid that wall grows higher and leads to inadvertent escalation.
Mm-hmm. So how does the region's security dynamics impacting the international community then?
How the situation in Northeast Asia impacts the rest? Well, I mean, it's a region where the big powers come together because you have China, obviously, very present in the region. Russia bordering much of the region. The U.S. present in many other ways, not actually through its land borders, but in many other ways it's very active in Northeast Asia. And so you have a kind of clash, which hopefully can be made more into a more kind of cooperative arrangement through such dialogues. But at the moment it's more of a clash or a contest. And it's simply one of those places in the world where these big powers with their competing interests and all their whole package of misunderstandings and misperceptions come together. And so it's dangerous because that plays out at certain flashpoints, including on the Korean Peninsula. And so historically that's been an important and very tense flashpoint, and that's how the neighborhood has evolved over time, and that's why it's really one of the top issues always on the international agenda, and one of the top 3 or 4 things that's always discussed in multilateral meetings, because if you don't resolve this, then there are all kinds of unpredictable problems, nuclear and climate change and many other very serious challenges that only become more dangerous as time goes on and as they don't get resolved.
Another question raised from your answer. So there are disputed sides here today, especially at this event, at this conference. So did you realize any solutions, or did you recognize that kind of segments during this event conference?
Yeah, actually one of the sessions was about confidence building and what kind of measures could help to achieve greater confidence. So in the profession, we call them CBMs, confidence building measures. So, unfortunately at times like this, there are more problems than solutions, but we did come up with a few, and one of them is, of course, investing in the next generation, which doesn't bring all that baggage and all those tensions to the table and brings new ideas and innovations and a different kind of mentality. And the importance is in harnessing that energy for good. And that's very important that professionals in our fields, diplomacy, security, make good use of this creative and talented young generation of peacemakers and leaders. And then also confidence building involves communication, improved communication. So dialogue itself is a confidence building measure. Having these kind of meetings is critically important because you can quietly discuss many problems between conflict parties. You can work out what the room for maneuver is, what are the red lines, what are the mutual expectations and needs, and you can come up with some creative ideas that are more difficult to do when you have high-level track one discussions. Sometimes in these kind of quieter settings, you can come up with more creative ideas, and that's why these meetings are so important. And then, of course, there are the various security mechanisms and the general international security architecture, which also serves the purpose of reducing tension, reducing suspicions, making things more predictable, primarily through communication, and helping the sides talk through their priorities and concerns. And this is things like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the SICA and various other formats. So there are a few of these mechanisms that function in this region and serve the purpose of trying to promote, common cooperative security for the region. So there are all these things. I don't know if they're silver bullet solutions, but they all come together as kind of a patchwork of different ideas, and surely there'll be more. So, of course, there's a need to continue such dialogues into the future.
Yeah, I just want to add 2 points, both to Paul and also Demanta. At the clear example here, today, Russian scholars, Chinese scholars, and American scholars are not talking to each other because all the countries have a very tense relationship. And one of the benefits we had, over 10 academics from Chinese side and the Americans, and also the Russian and American scholars sitting together on one table is, I would say, it's a clear success of bringing these parties. They cannot convene and visit each other, but they can all visit Mongolia and talk about the security. And going back to the Manta's point, so UBD is not only security dialogue now, so we added 2 more sessions. One is the economic cooperation, so which is organized by the Business Council of Mongolia. So bring economics together, talk about what's the security implication on the economic. And this year we talked about how the post-COVID economic cooperation will be in the region look like. And the other big session, and then we're missing one representative here, it's United Nations Social Economic Commission for Asia Pacific. So they are very concerned about the green power grade, economic connectivity, and sustainable development objectives. And so they bring also their own platform, talk about not only the security, but they will talk about how the region will have a more sustainable development objectives. So thank you.
And I'd like to add what Mandy said, the dialogue is very inclusive. So it's the inclusivity which makes the dialogue very strong. And in that spirit, we hope to meet next year our DPRK colleagues at the dialogue as well. We met them before and had very important conversations. So I think the inclusivity is a very important factor for the dialogue and for all of us to come together and talk about solutions and plans to move forward. Thank you.
And also just to add Mendes and Sonia's ideas, since 2017, the UB Dialogue has been held on 1.5 track level. And this year, the co-organizers were really pleased to see our old friends who contributed a lot in previous years. And also this year, the UB Dialogue has been reached and broadened by new participants. And also high-ranking officials participated in the conference, including the United Nations Undersecretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, and the Secretary General of the National Security Council of the Republic of Turkey, and also the Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs of the Republic of Korea, and the Deputy Director General of the Asia and Oceania of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan, and so on. So it was really a good sign that, year by year, the UB Dialogue has been expanding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One more point. You raised a very important point between dialogue and action. And speaking about the dialogue, it's especially when it comes to the security issues, the dialogue is important. And I'm echoing our colleagues' point. But without mutual understanding, or without understanding our partners and the reason behind each partner's position, without understanding that, this might lead to unforeseeable consequences or dangerous consequences. This is why dialogue is so much important when it comes to the security issues. And without understanding this, action might lead to disaster situations. So that's what we need to be preventing. And that's what the UB Dialogue is trying to provide the floor so that interested parties can gather in Mongolia and discuss about their differences and come to bring closer together their positions. And like our colleagues pointed out, and my DG Mantra pointed out, In terms of participants, in terms of number, and in terms of level, it increased. It's expanding. UB Dialogue is expanding. In the past, UB Dialogue was concentrated on Northeast Asian security issues, particularly the Korean Peninsula issues. But now today we have participants from a wide range of regions, Europe, North America, and a lot of international institutions are participating. And hence, consequently, the issues we are discussing is also expanding. And Mongolia would be in future happy to provide a floor for discussion in a wide range of issues, not only Northeast Asian security issues, but beyond.
I think we can all agree that being inclusive, because putting down all these sides on one table is actually the biggest success here about this dialogue. So I would like to ask the one last question about this security dynamic from Ms. Sonia and Mr. Paul. We talked about the big countries here, right? So which are China, Japan, and the United States playing a crucial role in our region. So how do they impact our regional stability and their strategic interests affecting this region?
I think all of those countries have an interest to collaborate on regional security issues, because eventually regional security issues affect global security as well. And I believe strongly that despite living in geopolitically challenging times, every country has interests to collaborate. And I'm thinking a lot about issues we heard from the young peace builders, climate change, desertification. There's a lot of regional opportunity for collaboration on the environmental agenda and on health issues as well. We just came out of a large pandemic, which actually we need to learn our lessons to really collaborate on a myriad of issues. And I feel Mongolia is a perfect platform to really inject momentum in the renewed collaboration, be it security, health, environment. And I really believe we need to come together collectively in these challenging times, as all my colleagues sat here and have collective action for a better planet and prosperity, which serves the region, but eventually actually serves the global good as well.
Well, two of the countries you mentioned, the US and China, are members of the most important global body for promoting and defending international security, the UN Security Council. And all of them, you mentioned Japan as well, with the other two, all of them are quite vocal defenders of the international norms that have been well established over the last nearly 80 years, particularly the norm of the respect of state sovereignty and inviolability of borders and so on. So while they meet and have certain tensions in this region, they also all play a global role as champions of the international order. And in fact, they have a huge responsibility, some of them, particularly the big players, to be the upholders of those most fundamental norms. And unfortunately, those norms have been severely challenged in the last year and a half. And so I think that those states, plus others, and Mongolia is another example of a middle power that can play a very positive role for promoting a constructive conversation about international norms and the international system. All of those countries will have a role in shaping what our international security order looks like going forward, because now it's going through some very difficult times and it's being severely undermined and damaged. But there will be a future international security order. There always was after such catastrophic events. And these countries will be involved in that conversation and in that shaping of the next security order.
I'm afraid we're running out of time. So, Mr. Byamsuran, This year's conference theme was Future Peace. So will you sum up the conference and under the theme?
Of course, like I pointed out in the beginning, the idea of UB Dialogue is to bring together all the parties and discuss about their differences and explain their position and the stories behind that. And at the conference, we've been able to do that, both at the academic level and at the government level. And gathering together, we discussed the points. Well, the dialogue is a process, and it needs to be going on. It's not going to end today, and it's a continuous process. And I think the UB Dialogue this provided or paved a way to the future dialogues and future mutual understanding.
Mm-hmm. The last, of course.
I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Just adding to DJ Bimsuren's points, the mutual trust and mutual understanding is utmost, and just leaving no one behind. And we need to look forward and move forward for the prosperous future in the region and beyond.
Mm-hmm. The last question is for you, Mr. Mëndэж. Was it an effective conference towards the disputed sides? How do you see it? Because you're from the Institution of Strategic Studies.
So I probably could go back to Bjornsson's point. It's a process, and I would say it's effective because they came together and being in one hall and listen to each other's points inside. So I would say it's effective, but how much change it made, we don't know. But at least we will need to bring these parties together, let them talk.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a very brief and certain answer. Thank you very much. So today's our special program under the topic of Ulaanbaatar Dialogue, the 8th International Conference. You are watching this special program, and we are here with Mr. Bjornsson and Ms. Manthe from Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia, and Mr. Mëndэж from the Strategic Studies Institution of Mongolia, and Ms. Sonia Bachmann, the team leader of Northeast Asia and the Pacific of UN Department of Political Affairs of the United Nations, and Mr. Paul Jakovits, head of Diplomatic Dialogue of Geneva Center for Security Policy. Thank you for making your golden time for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.